new and interesting ideas that are worthy of experimental testing, but never expect them to be immediately popular or easy to sell, even if they're proven to work. If you would like an easy life, never come up with a solution to a problem that is drawn from a field of expertise other than that from which it is assumed the solution will arise. A few years ago, my colleagues produced an extraordinary intervention to reduce crime. They hypothesized that the presence of the metal shutters that shops in crime-ridden areas covered their windows with at night may in fact increase the incidence of crime, since they implicitly communicated that this was a lawless area. So one of my colleagues, the brilliant Tara Austin, had seen research that suggested that Disney faces, as they're known, large-eyed human faces with the proportions of young children, seemed to have a calming effect. Combining the two ideas, she created an experiment where shop shutters were painted with the faces of babies and toddlers by a local graffiti artists collective. By all measures, this seemed to reduce crime significantly. Moreover, it did so at a tiny cost, and certainly by less than the cost of direct policing. Several other local authorities have since repeated the approach, though take-up is low. Strangely, it's much easier to argue for larger policing budgets or for the installation of CCTV than to approach a problem purely psychologically. In a sensible world, of course, the only thing that would matter would be solving a problem by whatever means works best. But problem-solving is a strangely status-conscious job. There are high-status approaches and low-status approaches. Even Steve Jobs encountered the disdain of the nerdier elements of the software industry. What does Steve do exactly? He can't even code, a colleague once snootily observed. But compared to an 18th century counterpart, Jobs had it easy. In the mid-18th century, a largely self-taught clockmaker called John Harrison heard that the British government had pledged £20,000, which is several $1 million in today's money, as a prize for anyone who could establish longitude to within half a degree after a journey from England to the West Indies. He became determined to find a solution. This was a life-and-death matter. A navigational disaster by British naval ships off the Scilly Isles in 1707 had left several thousand sailors dead. To judge any proposed solutions, the Crown established a board of longitude, consisting of the Astronomer Royal, admirals, and mathematics professors, along with the Speaker of the House of Commons and 10 members of Parliament. You'll notice that there were no clockmakers on the committee. The prize was clearly offered under the assumption that the solution would be an astronomical one, featuring celestial measurement and advanced calculation. In the end, Harrison produced an astonishing series of discoveries that led to the invention of the marine chronometer, and with it a revolution in navigation. Once ships could carry an accurate timepiece at sea, they were finally able to calculate how far they'd travelled from east to west, without recourse to less reliable, indeed more dangerous methods. Alongside Harrison's remarkable technological work, there's also an interesting psychological aspect to this story. Although they awarded him a great deal of money for his invention, the prize was always denied to him, even though he demonstrated that his solution worked more than once. Indeed, a great part of his later life was spent petitioning the authorities and complaining that he'd been cheated of his reward. Neville Maskelyne, a supporter of the lunar distances method of astronomical calculation, is often portrayed as the villain for denying Harrison the prize, and it can't have helped Harrison's case when Maskelyne was made Astronomer Royal and therefore a member of the prize-giving committee. But the real story is one of professional and academic hierarchy. To an astronomer, the solution of an uneducated man whose life had been spent making clocks did not seem worthy of recognition. I'm not so sure that Maskelyne was a villain, and am more inclined to see him as a typical intellectual. I say this because we see the same pattern in a series of significant innovations. Science seems to fall short of its ideals whenever the theoretical elegance of the solution, or indeed the intellectual credentials of the solver, are valued above the practicality of an idea. If a problem is solved using a discipline other than that practiced by those who believe themselves the rightful guardians of the solution, you'll face an uphill struggle, no matter how much evidence you can amass. Until 1948, the Wright brothers' flyer was displayed not in the Smithsonian, as it is today, but in the Science Museum in London. This might seem strange, they had no British connection, but for years after the bicycle shop owners from Ohio had flown their manned heavier-than-air device on North Carolina's Outer Banks, the US government refused to acknowledge their achievement, maintaining that a government